The storm had shut down half the airport that night. Chairs were lined with tired travellers trying to sleep. Announcements echoed through the empty terminal, and the air conditioning made the place feel colder than it should have. Michael sat hunched forward, his jacket wrapped around his little girl. 7-year-old Sophie was curled against him, her face pressed into his chest, whispering now and then that she was cold. He pulled her closer, wishing he had thought to pack more than just a thin sweater for the trip. They were supposed to be on their way to Chicago to see her grandparents. Instead, they were stuck in Denver, stranded overnight like dozens of other families. Michael rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of another long day. Being a single father meant there was never anyone else to lean on. He carried it all, the work, the parenting, the constant balancing act. Tonight was no different. A few rows away, a woman in a dark business suit shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She looked like someone who belonged in a boardroom, not half asleep on a plastic chair under fluorescent lights. Michael noticed her arms wrapped tight around herself, her lips pressing together as if she was trying not to shiver. She glanced in his direction more than once, her green eyes sharp even in exhaustion. Most people at that hour avoided eye contact, but not her. She kept watching him, her gaze steady, like she was studying every move he made. Michael brushed a strand of hair from Sophie's forehead and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart, just close your eyes. We'll be on our way in the morning." He tried to believe it himself, though part of him wondered why that stranger across the aisle seemed so intent on him and his daughter. Michael shifted in his chair, trying to find a position that didn't leave his back aching. The airport felt colder with every passing minute, and Sophie stirred against his chest, pulling the jacket tighter around her shoulders. Across from him, the woman in the business suit hugged her arms, rubbing them for warmth. She tried to sit upright, but the shiver in her shoulders gave her away. For a moment, Michael hesitated. He wasn't the type to start conversations with strangers, especially this late at night, but he knew the look of someone uncomfortable. He'd seen it in his students before they admitted they needed help, and he saw it now in her. "Excuse me," he said softly, careful not to wake Sophie. "Are you all right? You look freezing over there." The woman blinked, clearly surprised. Her eyes were striking up close, sharp green with a hint of tiredness, and there was a small scar above her eyebrow that gave her face a quiet toughness. She nodded quickly. "I'm fine, thank you." But Michael caught the faint sound of her teeth chattering. He looked down at Sophie, then back at the woman. He cleared his throat nervously. "I know this might sound strange, but if you want to move closer, we could share a little warmth, just so you're not sitting there shaking all night. It's not much, but it's better than nothing." The woman studied him carefully, like she was weighing something more important than a simple offer. Finally, she picked up her bag and walked over, settling into the chair next to him. The air between them seemed to soften right away. Sophie shifted in her sleep, and without thinking, leaned toward the new source of warmth. "She's beautiful," the woman said quietly, glancing down at Sophie. "Your daughter?" Michael nodded, brushing a loose strand of hair from Sophie's face. "Yeah, Sophie. We're headed to Chicago to see her grandparents, or we were supposed to." The woman gave a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm Rachel," she said, "travelling for work, always for work." Her voice carried a hint of something Michael recognised, exhaustion that went deeper than just a cancelled flight. The terminal lights hummed above them, a dull glow that made everything feel even more lifeless. Most travellers had stretched out across chairs or curled up on the floor, desperate for sleep. For Michael, staying awake felt safer, at least until morning. Rachel sat with her hands folded in her lap, her jacket pulled tight. For a while they sat in silence, broken only by the soft breathing of Sophie against her father's chest. Then Rachel tilted her head, her eyes catching his in the half-light. "You don't travel much, do you?" she asked softly. Michael chuckled under his breath. "That obvious? You keep checking the screens like you don't trust the gate agents to tell you when the flight's ready." He shrugged. "I guess I'm just used to being the one who has to stay on top of everything. Teaching, raising a kid. It's a habit." Rachel nodded like she understood more than she wanted to admit. "Teaching, that's a tough job." "It has its moments," Michael said. "Kids keep you honest, And tired. He glanced at Sophie, her hair messy against his jacket. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. There was a pause, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable but heavy with things unsaid. Rachel's gaze dropped to Sophie and lingered. "She's lucky to have you," she murmured. Michael smiled faintly, though there was weariness in it. "Some days I wonder if she'd be luckier with more stability, more money. Her mum thought so." "Mum?" Rachel's eyes flicked up at him, sharp for a second, then softened again. "Money isn't everything," she said, her tone quiet but firm. Something in the way she said it made Michael glance at her differently. There was a weight in her words, as if she spoke from her own mistakes. Before he could ask, Sophie stirred and mumbled something in her sleep. Michael rubbed her back gently, whispering to calm her. When he looked up again, Rachel was still watching, but now there was something else in her expression, a mix of curiosity and conflict, like she was trying to decide how much of herself to reveal. The night dragged on, the airport quieter than Michael had ever known it. Even the loudspeaker announcements had slowed to a whisper, like the whole place was holding its breath until morning. Rachel leaned back in her chair, her eyes still on Sophie. "She looks a lot like you," she said. Michael chuckled softly. "Poor kid. She got my messy hair and my stubborn streak. The rest, well, she's her own little person." Rachel smiled, but it faded quickly. "Do you ever get help? With her, I mean, or is it just you?" "Just me," Michael answered, his voice even but tired. "Her mum lives out west now. She remarried, new life, new everything. Sophie visits in the summers, but the rest of the year it's me." Rachel tilted her head, studying him closely. "That must be hard, balancing all the bills, the schoolwork, the everything." Michael gave a short laugh. "You've got that right. Some days I'm just trying to make sure the lights stay on." There was a pause. Rachel hesitated, then asked in a voice that was almost too casual, "Have you ever noticed anything unusual with your bank accounts? Letters, calls, things that don't add up?" The question caught him off guard. He frowned, shifting Sophie gently in his arms. "Why do you ask?" Rachel shrugged like she was brushing it off. "I just hear stories sometimes, people getting taken advantage of. It happens more than you'd think." Michael leaned back, staring at her for a moment. "Funny you say that. I've gotten a few letters lately. Strange ones, something about accounts I don't remember opening. I figured it was some kind of mistake, junk mail maybe." Rachel's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened on the strap of her bag. She looked away quickly, like the conversation had gone further than she meant. Michael noticed, and for the first time that night, a flicker of unease passed through him. The terminal had gone almost silent. A janitor pushed a cart down the far hall, the squeak of the wheels echoing faintly, and somewhere a vending machine hummed. Michael finally felt Sophie's breathing steady, her little body heavy in his arms. Then she stirred, a whimper at first, then a small cry. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice broken by sleep. "I dreamed they took you away." Michael's chest tightened. He kissed the top of her head, smoothing her hair back. Hey, it was just a dream. Nobody's taking me anywhere. You're safe. I'm right here." Sophie clung tighter, her small hands gripping his shirt. But it felt real, like someone was watching us. Michael's heart skipped. He rocked her gently, whispering, "Dreams can feel scary, but that's all they are. Just dreams." He waited until her eyes fluttered closed again before letting out a long breath. When he looked up, Rachel hadn't looked away. Her expression was unreadable, her green eyes fixed on him as if she'd heard every word. "She has vivid dreams, huh?" Rachel said quietly. "Sometimes," Michael answered, though his voice carried more edge than before. Rachel leaned back, folding her arms, but there was tension in her shoulders. For the first time since she sat down beside him, Michael noticed how alert she seemed, even through the exhaustion. Like she wasn't just another stranded traveller trying to pass the night. And somewhere deep down, a thought whispered to him. Maybe Sophie wasn't entirely wrong. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, though Michael couldn't have said exactly how long he'd been half dozing in that chair. Every time he let his eyes close, the chill in the air or the creak of a chair nearby pulled him awake again. At some point, Sophie shifted and let out a soft sigh, her small hand still clutching the fabric of his shirt. Michael kissed her forehead, whispered something soothing, and looked around the nearly empty terminal. That was when he noticed Rachel wasn't in her seat. He straightened, scanning the quiet row of chairs until he spotted her near the corner by the vending machines. She had her phone pressed tight against her ear, her body angled away from him. Even from a distance, Michael could see the tension in her posture, the way her free hand moved as if she were explaining something. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but the words that carried across the stillness made his chest tighten. He doesn't suspect anything? Not yet. Michael froze. He thought about standing, about walking over, but Sophie stirred against him, and he stayed put. His jaw tightened as he kept watching Rachel, who nodded a few times, listening intently. Then she ended the call and slipped the phone into her bag. When she turned back, her expression had shifted. She forced a smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes, and walked back toward her seat. "Sorry," she said lightly as she sat down. "Work call, they don't exactly respect time zones." Michael managed a nod, though the unease in his stomach didn't fade. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to think it was nothing. But Sophie's dream echoed in his head like a warning he couldn't ignore. The minutes slipped by in uneasy silence. Michael sat still, pretending to rest, though his mind was racing. Beside him, Rachel folded her arms and leaned back, as if nothing unusual had happened. Then Sophie stirred again, blinking herself awake. She rubbed her eyes with small fists and lifted her head, squinting at the woman now sitting so close. "Hi," Sophie mumbled sleepily. "Are you flying alone?" Rachel, startled, then gave a small smile. "I am." "That must be lonely," Sophie said matter-of-factly, the way only a child could. Rachel let out a soft laugh, one that sounded almost surprised. "Yeah, I guess it is." Michael smoothed Sophie's hair. "Close your eyes, sweetheart. Try to get a little more rest." But Sophie wasn't ready to let go. She turned her gaze back to Rachel, her voice carrying that innocent curiosity that cut straight through the tension. "Daddy says flying is more fun when you have someone to share it with." For the first time that night, Rachel's expression softened in a way Michael hadn't seen before. The edges of her guarded look melted, replaced by something vulnerable, almost wistful. "He's right," she whispered. "Your dad sounds very wise." Sophie smiled proudly. "He knows a lot, except how to braid hair. He's still learning." Michael rolled his eyes good-naturedly, heat rising to his cheeks. "Hey, I'm getting better at it." Rachel chuckled, and the sound wasn't forced this time. It slipped out warm and genuine. "Maybe I could teach him sometime," she said, then quickly looked down at her hands, as if realizing she'd given away more than she meant to. Michael studied her quietly, caught between appreciation for her kindness towards Sophie and the gnawing question that hadn't left him since that phone call. Who exactly was this woman sitting beside them? By the time the first pale light spilled through the wide airport windows, the terminal was stirring awake. Agents wheeled carts back into place, sleepy travellers stretched their stiff legs, and an announcement finally came over the speakers. The flight to Chicago was ready to board. Michael gently roused Sophie. She rubbed her eyes, then smiled when she saw Rachel still beside them. "You're on our plane too?" she asked. Rachel's answer came smoothly, almost too smooth. "Yes, same flight." Michael studied her, surprised. He hadn't seen her line up at the counter or even glance at the monitors. Yet she spoke as if she had known all along. He forced a small smile, but in the back of his mind a question lingered. Coincidence, or not? As they stood in line, Sophie slipped her hand into Rachel's, chattering about the braids she wanted to learn. Michael watched, torn between gratitude for how gentle Rachel was with his daughter, and the uneasy thought that Rachel might be more than just another stranded traveller. On the plane, Michael settled Sophie by the window with her colouring book. Rachel passed down the aisle and found a seat a few rows back. For a moment, it seemed like their paths would finally part, but as the plane levelled above the clouds, Michael glanced over his shoulder. Rachel wasn't sleeping, wasn't reading, not even pretending to doze like most passengers. Her eyes rested on him and Sophie, quiet but focused, as though she was studying every detail of their lives. When she noticed him looking, she turned away quickly, too quickly, as if she had been caught. Michael shifted back in his seat, his arm around Sophie as she leaned against him. He pressed a kiss to her hair, whispering, "Almost there, sweetheart." But his own thoughts refused to settle. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that Rachel wasn't done with them. The flight touched down just as the morning rush was filling the airport in Chicago. People spilled into the terminal, dragging carry-ons, rushing toward baggage claim, and reuniting with loved ones. Michael held Sophie's hand as they walked off the plane. Her face lit up when she spotted her grandparents waiting beyond the ropes. She let go of him and sprinted, her backpack bouncing as her grandmother bent down to catch her in a hug. Michael's shoulders eased for the first time in days. He smiled as his father clapped him on the back, the kind of solid embrace only a parent could give. For a few minutes, surrounded by the warmth of family, the long night in Denver faded away. But when Michael glanced over his shoulder, he saw Rachel in the crowd. She wasn't greeting anyone. She wasn't in a hurry. She stood a little apart, her bag slung over her shoulder, her eyes fixed on him and Sophie. He tried to convince himself it was nothing. Coincidence. Maybe her family hadn't shown up yet. Maybe she was waiting for her luggage. But as the reunion unfolded, she didn't move closer or wave goodbye, she simply watched. Sophie tugged at his sleeve, her voice bright. "Daddy, can Rachel come with us? She helped keep me warm last night." Michael forced a smile, brushing a hand over Sophie's hair. "She probably has somewhere she needs to be, sweetheart." When he looked back again, Rachel was gone, or at least he couldn't see her anymore. Still, as they walked out to meet the waiting car, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that Rachel hadn't really left. That evening, after Sophie had gone upstairs with her grandmother, Michael sat at the kitchen table with a pile of unopened mail. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed on his shoulders. He sorted through envelopes until one stopped him cold. A letter from a bank he had never used, thanking him for opening an account. His chest tightened. Not again. A knock at the back door startled him. When he opened it, Rachel stood there, her coat pulled close around her. She looked different somehow, less polished, more unsettled. "Rachel." Michael kept his voice low so it wouldn't carry upstairs. "What are you doing here? How did you even—" "I shouldn't be here," she cut in gently, "but I couldn't leave things the way they are." Michael frowned, his guard rising. "What are you talking about?" She stepped inside slowly, her eyes falling to the letter on the table. "You've been getting more of those, haven't you? Accounts, charges, things you don't recognise." Michael's pulse kicked. "Yes, but how would you know that?" Rachel hesitated. Her fingers gripped the strap of her bag like she was holding on for courage. "Because I wasn't just another passenger stuck in Denver. I was already meant to be on that flight. I had reasons to keep an eye on you." Michael froze, staring at her. "Keep an eye on me?" Her voice softened, steady but full of regret. "At first, it was my job. I was asked to look into suspicious activity connected to your name. But after last night, after seeing you with Sophie, I can't pretend anymore. I don't believe you're the one behind it." Michael sank into the chair, the letter crumpling in his hand. "You were watching me." His voice cracked with disbelief. "All this time you were watching me." Rachel stepped closer, her eyes meeting his. "Yes, and that's why I know, Michael. You're not the man those files make you out to be." Michael stood frozen, his hand still gripping the back of the chair. "Under investigation?" The words felt foreign in his mouth. "For what? I'm a teacher, Rachel. I barely make enough to pay the mortgage." Her voice softened, though the weight behind it didn't. "That's exactly why I knew something was wrong. The accounts, the transfers, the credit lines, they don't fit you. You live too simple, too honest. Someone else has been using your information." Michael shook his head, the frustration rising. "But who? How could anyone even get access?" Rachel hesitated, her eyes flicking away for a moment. Then she stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Someone who knows you, someone who had access to your social security number, your bank statements, your paperwork from before the divorce." The implication hit him like a punch. He felt his throat tighten, his mind racing back through the years. The times Amanda had handled their taxes, the forms she insisted on keeping when they separated, the casual way she brushed off his questions. "No," Michael said, his voice cracking. "She wouldn't do that. Amanda, she's Sophie's mother." Rachel's eyes softened with sympathy, but her silence was louder than words. Michael's legs gave way and he sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. The kitchen around him blurred, the sound of Sophie's laughter upstairs twisting like a knife. I trusted her, he whispered. Even after everything, I trusted her. Rachel stood quietly for a moment, giving him space, then spoke gently. I know this hurts, but I also know what kind of father you are. I've seen it with my own eyes, and that's why I'm here. I'm not letting this ruin you, or her. Michael lifted his head, his eyes red. And what if you're wrong? What if I'm just the fool who ignored every warning sign? Rachel's voice steadied, calm but fierce. Then let me help you prove it, because I promise you, Michael, you're not alone in this anymore. The kitchen was heavy with silence. Michael sat slumped at the table, the letter still lying open in front of him. Rachel stood nearby, her hands folded tightly as if holding back more than she was willing to say. The sound of small footsteps broke the stillness. Sophie padded halfway down the stairs, her hair tousled from sleep, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. Daddy, she asked softly, why are you crying? Michael quickly wiped at his face, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I'm not, sweetheart. Just tired, that's all. You should be in bed. But Sophie wasn't convinced. She looked from her father to Rachel, her little brow furrowed in confusion. I heard you. You said someone was trying to hurt us. Michael's heart sank. He opened his arms and she hurried into them, pressing her face against his chest. He kissed the top of her head, whispering, No one is going to hurt us. Not while I'm here. Sophie's voice wavered, muffled against his shirt. But is it true? Did you do something bad? The question shattered him. He closed his eyes, holding her tighter, his voice breaking as he answered, No, baby, Daddy didn't do anything wrong, I promise you. Rachel stepped forward then, kneeling so she was eye level with Sophie. Her voice was calm but certain. Your dad is one of the good ones. He's the kind of man who gives more than he ever takes. Don't you forget that? Sophie looked at her with wide, searching eyes. Then why are people saying he did? Rachel hesitated, then reached out, her hand resting gently on the girl's shoulder. Because sometimes bad people use good people to cover their tracks. And that's what happened here, but your dad is innocent. I'll make sure everyone knows that. Sophie's small arms tightened around her father, as if afraid he might slip away. Michael met Rachel's gaze over her daughter's head. For the first time, he saw not just a stranger who had followed him, but someone who might be willing to stand with him when the storm hit hardest. The next few days passed in a blur. Michael tried to keep life as normal as possible for Sophie, driving her to the park, helping her with her spelling homework, laughing when she insisted on teaching him a dance she learned from her cousins. On the surface, everything looked ordinary, but under it all, fear still pressed in like a weight he couldn't shake. Rachel kept her distance from the family when others were around, but Michael noticed her car parked not far from the school, or the way she showed up at the coffee shop just as he was leaving. It should have felt unsettling, but instead there was a strange comfort in knowing she hadn't disappeared. One evening she showed up at his classroom after the students had gone home. The last of the sunlight stretched through the blinds, casting long stripes across the desks. Michael looked up from the stack of papers he was grading, weariness etched in every line of his face. Tell me you have something, he said quietly. Rachel closed the door behind her and laid a folder on his desk. I followed the trail. Transfers, fake accounts, credit pulled under your name, and it all leads back to Amanda. Michael's stomach dropped at the sound of his ex-wife's name. Rachel's tone was calm but unyielding. Her new husband owns a construction company. They've been moving dirty money through accounts that trace back to you. Amanda had access to everything from the divorce papers. That's how she did it. Michael leaned back in his chair, running both hands over his face. I can't believe this. She put our daughter in the middle of this without a second thought. Rachel's expression softened. I know it's hard to hear, but the good news is, I can prove it. I've already sent copies of the files to the right people. Once the process plays out, you'll be cleared. Michael looked at her, his voice unsteady. Why are you doing this, Rachel? You could have just walked away. Your job was to watch me, not save me. She met his gaze steadily. Because somewhere along the line, you stopped being a case, you became a person, a father who would give up everything for his daughter. And once I saw that, I couldn't just sit back. In the quiet that followed, the weight of her words sank in. For the first time in weeks, Michael felt the smallest flicker of hope break through the fear. The call came late on a Friday afternoon. Michael was still at his desk, the last of his students long gone. Papers were scattered in front of him, but he hadn't been able to focus for days. When the phone rang, he answered with the tired tone of someone bracing for more bad news. Instead, it was Rachel. Her voice was steady, almost too calm. "It's done. Amanda and her husband were taken in this morning. The accounts are frozen, the transfers traced. You're cleared, Michael. It's over." He sat back in his chair, gripping the receiver as if it might disappear. For a long moment, he couldn't breathe. Relief hit him hard, but so did something else, grief for the years of trust Amanda had shattered. He hung up slowly, his hands trembling. That night, Sophie climbed into his lap while he sat on the couch staring at the muted television. She touched his face with her small hands. "You're safe now, right?" Michael pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Yeah, baby girl, we're safe." His voice cracked, and he didn't bother to hide it. The following week, Rachel appeared at the school auditorium during Sophie's spring play. She stood quietly in the back row, unnoticed by most, until Sophie spotted her from the stage. The little girl's face lit up mid-performance, her smile so wide it nearly broke Michael's heart. Afterwards, Sophie tugged Rachel down to her level and whispered, "You came." Rachel's eyes softened. "Of course I did." Michael watched them, something shifting inside him. Trust didn't come easy anymore. Betrayal had cut him too deeply. But seeing Sophie beam up at Rachel, seeing the gentle way Rachel bent down to meet her, he felt the first fragile thread of it weaving back together. For the first time in a long while, he let himself imagine that maybe they weren't as alone as he thought. Summer settled in, bringing long evenings and air thick with the sound of crickets. Life felt different now. Michael no longer jumped every time the mail arrived. The weight that had pressed on his shoulders for months had lifted, piece by piece. Rachel had become part of their rhythm without forcing her way in. Some evenings she joined them for dinner, laughing as Sophie insisted on teaching her silly songs from school. Other nights she sat on the porch, helping Sophie tame her wild hair into braids, while Michael watched from his chair, a quiet smile tugging at his face. One night, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft gold, Sophie wriggled happily, while Rachel tied off the end of a braid with a pink ribbon. She hopped up and ran straight to Michael. "Daddy, look, she makes better braids than you do. Can we keep her forever?" Michael laughed, his throat tight, as he pulled Sophie into his arms. He looked over her shoulder at Rachel, who stood in the fading light with a softness in her eyes he hadn't seen in anyone for a long time. Later, after Sophie had gone to bed, Michael walked Rachel out to her car. The night air was warm, carrying the smell of cut grass. He hesitated before speaking. "I don't know what the future looks like, Rachel, but I do know Sophie is happier with you around. And if I'm being honest, so am I." Rachel's smile was small but steady. "Then maybe that's enough, one day at a time." Michael nodded, the knot in his chest loosening. For the first time in years, the future didn't look like something to fear. It looked like something they could build together. Inside, Sophie peeked from her bedroom window, whispering to herself with the certainty only a child could have. "She's ours now." Then she climbed under the covers, drifting to sleep with a smile. Lesson. Sometimes the people we trust most can hurt us, and the ones we never expected can become our safe place. Real love and family are not always about blood, but about who chooses to stand by you when everything falls apart. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end of this story. I'm truly grateful for your time and support. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you again soon, right here on Rain Inside.